All right, the time is 5:48. The date is Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. Jim Franklin is absent. Jada and Brian are both online virtually. I will now open the meeting and take roll calls. Jada.
Here.
Brian.
Here.
Keith. I am here. Please note we are doing a hybrid meeting with in-person and virtual attendance. If a member of the virtual public would like to make comments during a public hearing, please use the raise hand function on Zoom and you will be assigned a speaking time. If you are listening in via telephone dial-in, please press *9 to raise your hand and then press *6 to unmute yourself. This meeting is being recorded by the local scene and a record of this meeting will be posted on the local scene website as soon as they are able. Anyone intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting should notify me at this time. Okay. Our first update is open space and recreation plan.
Yeah, I thought I should come back and update because we've been done with the first draft for a long time now. And I did send the draft around for comment to a bunch of town boards and OCPC, and have not received comment back other than the Conservation Commission signed a support letter. The Board of Selectmen did come back to me again recently and say, you know, what do you actually need officially from us? So I just provided a little bit more information. And I believe on their next agenda on March 12th, I think that will be discussed. OCPC is working on their response. It's just taken a little bit of time. We do at a minimum need letters of support from Concom, BOS, and I think it said the local regional planning agency, which would be OCPC. Mm-hmm. So we are slowly making progress on that. You know, I don't know if I should be sending it back around to everybody again, just to see if any of the other boards want to comment on it. But I mean, it would be nice to have a comment probably from planning board. So I'll just make sure that that Val has everything that they need on that. But that's about it. Just a quick update that everything is still in process. And I guess I don't know how the effective date necessarily works. At this point, we're like a couple of years behind where we thought we would be in terms of having it actually established, but it's, as far as I would say, not really official until it's submitted to the state, which would make this a 2024 plan that would last until 2031 because we have a 7-year action plan. Mm-hmm. So that's my hope. And I hope that, you know, a support letter saying 2023 OSRP doesn't matter because it's just been a long time that this part of the process has taken. So that's about it, unless anybody has questions.
I was hoping we would have heard back from people.
Happens.
Okay. Next is update on Base Pond's accessible trails project. Is that behind the scenes then?
Yes. So this is, I forget where, I mean, I guess the original concept came from Dot McFarlane from the Conservation Commission, came over one day and asked if we had any really flat trails in town that the seniors could walk. And I said, not really. And then through our work at town meeting to get the parcel that's adjacent to what we would call the evergreen parcels that Concom already owned over there on the other side of the wetlands from the senior center, the idea of kind of tying all that together with pre-existing parking and infrastructure here at Town Hall, sort of make it so that you could have a trail not only for seniors to use directly from the senior center, but anybody else in town who's looking to do a short walk and doesn't want to go find a new parking area somewhere they've never been to, maybe can stop at Town Hall, pay a bill, and then go for a hike. So I've had Juliana spearhead pretty much everything on this project. She worked with Aaron Benoit from the planning office on a Mass Trails grant application for a design So we would need grant funding in stages. This is stage one, which would be design and permitting. So we got a couple of quotes to have a firm, assess sort of the best way to get through the wetlands there with a boardwalk that would be nice and wide with a handrail so that, it could be used both by the senior community and as an ADA accessible trail. Hopefully with a little kind of overlook spot on Bates Pond, which is the pond out back. They used to have the gazebo on it. And that boardwalk would pop out into the uplands over on the evergreen parcels where there are pre-existing fire roads, like the dirt 2-track roads that have been kind of overgrown over the years. So just kind of, as the second phase, once we actually get out to do the work, kind of making all those upland trails, a little better maintained, making sure that they're wide enough, making sure that they're relatively flat enough for people to make best use of them. Those are the same trails back when Dana Dupree was on the Conservation Commission. He wanted to go back there and cut, the deadfall out of the way to make sure that those were still accessible as fire roads in case of fire. So it all just kind of wraps in with the same type of thing, but taking these parcels back there, that have been effectively landlocked and tie them into here is a pretty good idea. So they got that application in for the trails grant. We're waiting to hear back from that. In the meantime, we needed match funding for that. So Juliana prepped a application for Samson Fund, asking for just over $15,000, $15,200 to be used as match funds for this grant, assuming that we get it. And we just received notification that it was mostly funded. I think we asked for 15.2, we were awarded 14,800, which is awesome. So that's a good step in the right direction. Obviously, all Samson Fund stuff still goes on to town meeting warrant. So as long as everything goes well, it looks like that project is starting to come together. That will be really good. We don't really have any accessible trails in town. The Mulligan's Landing Pier technically is an accessible trail. It's just a really short one, unless you get into the Jones River after that. And we had talked, and the hope is that when we do all of this restoration work at the Winthrop Street property, that the trail that goes around the old bog could be maintained as an ADA accessible trail. We're just not exactly sure whether we can pull that off or not. We're trying.
You might need
sand,
like a stone dust.
Yeah.
Seen those before.
Yeah.
Towns up in Metro West will put in stone dust paths along waterways.
And
they'll have the park benches and wheelchair signs and all that kind of stuff. It's really what they're trying to make accessible.
Yeah,
I was thinking about Winthrop Street, but because that seems like it's flat-ish.
It is,
It's
especially
flat,
the area around around the bog.
Right.
There's also a perimeter trail that goes all the way around the natural wetland there, and that one is a little narrower and rougher.
And a lot of rooty. And
it would be, to me, too much
Right.
of a construction project to try to
Right.
widen those, but the ones that go around the bog should be pretty easy to get done. There was just a little bit of a back and forth during the MEPA process or some of the permitting processes with Jones River Watershed, just because stone dusts or certain things aren't always like
most of that is
the
flat, except
best
for
material in terms of like things being able to wash into the water. So we got the permitting documents sort of to say clean aggregate material, but I think ultimately that's going to be something hopefully like that, because it would be, I think, an ideal place to have that sort of a trail. The only other tricky thing is the parking there. The parking is a very rough, large gravel parking area. So if you're talking wheelchair accessibility, we may have to do a section of that parking lot, like we would call it like a handicap parking spot or something, where it's like that kind of hard pack, where
you can't have a drastic transition.
Yeah.
From the parking lot to the path to the trail.
Right.
Yeah. So that's probably feasible. Like we wanted to make sure that parking lot was pervious because of the proximity to Sampson's Brook, but having one small portion of it that probably is outside of the 200-foot be more like a hard pack surface that connects right to the trail is probably something we could pull off.
Yeah.
But this one, assuming we can get the grant, which I feel pretty good about, we'll start the design and permitting process on this, which can be designed specifically to be, and I think really all trails that they fund out of this program, they want to be accessible. So, you know, if that means that the design of the boardwalk has to be a little more robust, that's just what they're looking for anyways. So that's just what it will be. And then, you know, it'll come around to having to do fundraising for actual implementation on that, which I'm sure will cost quite a bit of money, but hopefully there's enough grant money out there that we can pull that off.
The next one is just trails and connectivity, which I assume kind of tie into.
Yeah. And so it's been a while since we've done open space, and it hasn't had a ton of attention from my department necessarily. So that's why I wanted to make sure we just put open forum up there. If any member feels like we should be talking about something, then we'll go for it. But I wanted to throw trails and connectivity up there because the planning department and conservation departments have been meeting. Would you say, is it like weekly, bi-weekly? Every other Tuesday to discuss trails and connectivity in town. And it's something that it was you know, obviously a focal point in the open space recreation plan. It's something that, you know, open space members have talked about before as being, you know, concerns. So it's just something we're starting to work on with the planning department on where can we connect, how can we connect. You know, there's a lot of different things that can be done, and it's just a matter of trying to figure out a rough game plan for what can still be done compared to past iterations of the open space plan. There's been a lot of development since then in certain corridors that looked promising are now not possible anymore. So we want to get back into planning some of that stuff.
There's also something you said about when you're looking at all the different assets you want to connect. What's the value of reaching a particular place?
Right.
Because I've been, you know, I spent a little bit of time down at Calista Farm trying to figure that out. And from what I can tell, if you wanted to go from, say, where you were, might be over, like, say, Patuxent or something like that.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we're going to loop you over here. How do you loop back out? It's an in, you know, it's basically a spur off of a connectivity. It's not this is a stop along the way.
Right.
Because it's basically all dead ended.
Right.
So it's a beautiful location. So it has that value.
Right.
But it doesn't naturally make us stop along the way if you're doing a real sort of loop system.
There's been talk, you know, and a lot of what we've been talking about with the planning department has been higher level and just trying to get at some just bigger things and have certain things mapped. But there's a lot of smaller things that we've talked about, like connecting, you know, you mentioned Patuxent Park. There's a whole neighborhood behind Patuxent Park off of Prospect Road. And there are trails that go all the way back there, but they hadn't been particularly well maintained. And part of them are on their private property for those residences back there. And there's talk about just getting connection through Patuxent Park out to Main Street so that you could get to Grays Beach. Things like that, trying to sort of connect things for walkability and for access to some of these places. So there's a lot of different things like that, and any ideas that any member has, you know, you want to just shoot me an email or something, we can wrap that into these conversations. You know, over time, as we start to put actual coherent thoughts together, we can probably put it together more as like an update for the committee so that you can see what's actually being done in that sense and how we're going forward with things, and you know, and start to put your ideas into it.
Yeah, maybe an idea would be with like the OneDrive,
yeah,
or the SharePoint, whatever you're using, is to have a document, like a spreadsheet, where you've got an inventory of all the different places, and people can, through the meeting process, create inputs. So, you know, does it make sense to connect with this? What's the value of it?
Yeah.
You know, somebody saying we'd love to have something along this road or get from here to Grays Beach, start building all that stuff, and then, you know, the project kind of builds itself too.
Yeah. One other main thing, at least for me, is Bay Circuit Trail. Quite a bit of the Bay Circuit Trail in Kingston is on the road. So it's always been a goal of mine to figure out how we can get more of it off-road, whether through easements or whatever we need to do. One of the ways, I forget, I was working on something for Hathaway Preserve. I think I was working on, I was making a story map of all of the town's conservation properties and just little bits of information about them and maps. And so I started mapping Hathaway, and we went out and mapped the trails. And that made me realize that the Bay Circuit did something funny there, where there was a spur that ended at the Jones River, but it was already blazed, marked in the field as though it was the Bay Circuit Trail. And it's because there's a section where the trail just ends at the river. There's what looks like there used to be a bridge there a long time ago. There's a little piece of iron or something in the, crossing the river there. But if there was a bridge there that crossed the Jones River, the Bay Circuit Trail could be off-road for a significant portion there. Instead, it crosses the Jones River in a different location and goes onto Foxworth Lane and then goes down Grove Street all the way to Cranberry Watershed Preserve. And if we were able to get a bridge across in this particular area, you could go from there through Three Rivers Preserve and cross Grove Street to get into Cranberry Watershed Preserve. So that's one kind of, I think, low-hanging fruit that if we can get grant funding or an Eagle project or something to get, another crossing out there. Three Rivers is also pretty wet. It's old cranberry bogs. There hasn't really been any ecological restoration there, so it's really just defunct cranberry bogs around section of the Jones River and I think Jones River Brook. So it may be a little tricky to get a coherent trail through that section too without needing boardwalk, which obviously increases costs, but it is something that I want to sort of look at as like a little subset project that could be pretty high bang for your buck in terms of getting a long stretch of needing to walk down Grove Street while you're doing the Bay Circuit Trail to actually stay in and around the Jones River and its tributaries, where people would really, I'm sure, rather be hiking where you're surrounded with nature and everything and not worrying about getting run over. So that was one that kind of popped up recently as something that could be a good option. On that note, there's already at least four or five bridges on the Jones River on the Hathaway property. There's three of them near Roger Carrera's property where there used to be a, I think an old, was it a clay pottery manufacturing mill in I think the 1800s. There's three bridges at that point. The biggest one was replaced last year or the year before by AMC volunteers, and it came out good. But there's one a little further upstream that's really long, and it's sort of just sinking into the wetlands. Yeah, the one that looks like a carnival ride.
Yeah.
It's not in bad enough shape that I think the whole thing needs to be completely redone. But what it looks like is they put supports into the wetland, and those supports in random places have just been sinking.
Right.
So I don't know if there's something that, again, if it can be an Eagle project or if it has to be something that we contract out or that a bunch of residents come together and try to be industrious with chest waders on and a jack and try to somehow like jack the wood off of the concrete supports and brace them. But it needs something because it's in really bad shape. In the winter, I would say it's relatively impassable because if it gets icy, you're not walking on it or you're going to be in the swamp.
Yeah.
So that's something that ultimately I would like to figure out. That's a little bit difficult in the day-to-day to prioritize and figure on. It's something that I've known since I started here that needs attention. It's just not the easiest thing to
get photography of it. Maybe
I do have some pictures. I probably could get a little more detailed in terms of trying to show the underneath. I think I did take a couple pictures that show the supports, but it would be maybe more helpful to actually get like a side view of what that looks like.
if you look at the residents, you know, people with different trade experiences or whatever they have, you start showing the photos and say, this is what it exists, and it's a description of what, you know, conservation department wants to do. Here's like a sketch, maybe what they think it'll look like.
Yeah.
What do you know, do you have this kind of a jack or whatever it is that you need? Are you interested in building it?
Okay.
You might find something.
Yeah, I'll check what I have for photos and see if I need to go take some more detailed.
No, it is a lot. It's pretty perfect.
But other than that, I mean, I think we've known that a lot of our maps need to be updated. A lot of the trail maps we had were really out of date. Still working on the whole CPC project where we had the school build kiosks. We went through and did a lot of other materials, but the map making portion of that, and some of the signage and stuff like that were things that mostly I was working on in spare time, which became scant. But this, whole story map idea was something that I had initially had Mike working on years ago. And then I recently picked it up, and that has sort of spurred me to get some more of the mapping done. And we picked up a GPS unit about a year ago that makes things a little bit easier as well. So we are working on updating a lot of these maps and getting them on our website, getting them places where people can actually use them and get out, explore these properties. Because Hathaway, is even just one that I think doesn't get a ton of use, that has a lot to offer a lot of people, depending on what you like to do.
For years of not having bridges, there were two others. I think one of them was replaced. Is that right?
I think that's
kind of went in
right,
with just dead end at every turn, and it's improved, but people who maybe stopped going years ago.
Yeah.
They don't know that it's been repaired.
Right.
And that road's awful getting in and out of there.
You're talking about the trail back to the parking area?
Whatever road we
Or you mean like Walking Road, like?
the road off of Walking Road. So I assume the road to the parking.
Yeah, it's just a little dirt
Yeah,
tree track.
but then you have to walk there, and then parking's fine. You gotta drive there.
It's in a different spot.
It must be. We were there in a car trying to squeeze by us towards like the power lines.
Where'd you park?
Yeah.
Like out back?
Yeah. We were in Frank's drive.
Where did the car go around?
On the road, like, so they must
So
have
you
been.
hiked back down the road, or when you
Yeah.
were in the car?
Yeah.
Because you can't fit two cars.
No,
past each other.
no, that's, I was like, oh my God, I was moving.
So you parked on the power lines and you were walking back
Yeah.
towards Route 106?
Yeah. I was like, man, imagine if we were like,
Why that way?
because it was like bigger.
So yeah, most of the trails go in the other direction towards the river. But it's been on my list to try to figure out better parking there, because
Right.
You've on the Conservation Commission seen some of the issues that we've had on retreat parking areas that aren't visible to the police or anybody else. And we only have a 10-foot easement there that goes through Roger Carrera's property out back. And that was, I think, sort of the first thing that put on my radar that we should be looking at purchasing Roger's property when it became available. Because that allows us to get rid of that situation, have the parking be in some place that's visible to the street. So if, a police officer was driving by at night, happens to notice there's a couple cars in the parking lot there, then there's probably something going on that, so that is something now that his property has become available that we've been working on. And I think, we're going to start to come out with a lot more public materials to try to get people more aware of what we're trying to do and get people hopefully interested in it, or they would at least understand why we're looking to do what we're doing. And I think it's partially because of that, partially ecological restoration, partially there's several other components to the project, agricultural preservation, volunteer stewardship, but really, it provides a lot more passive recreational resources to an area that already has, you already have Hathaway. You can go for, a decent amount of miles in the woods there. This would provide a more open experience, like a barge pond wildlife management area where you have the whole, bog roads are already existing. They're flat. You can walk around.
What about those for the ADA?
Yeah, I'd have to look into like the actual certification part of it,
Yeah.
but in functionality, they're flat
They're
dirt
already flat, right,
roads. So Burridge is very much like that. When my son was small enough to be in a stroller, we would go to that property a lot because the wide flat roads, it's relatively open, so you can kind of see, from a long distance away if there's, a dog running towards you or whatever. And I think a lot of people appreciate that. So this is a project that is coming up that will, I'm sure, have a lot of discussion, but it ties in with all of this because it definitely adds to the options for trails in the area. And I think it sort of makes that area a hub and helps protect the Jones and its tributaries and get some wetland restoration done there. And just a good project overall. And I think, checks some of the boxes of the open space plan that we'll get going soon. So yeah, I think that's it on trails and connectivity. It's just kind of pitching that this is something that the open space committee probably wants to take and run with, is trails and connectivity and implementation of the open space plan in that sense. So I don't know what makes the most sense for everybody. A OneDrive setup is definitely a good idea, where it's a good way, because how do you get all your information, right? Unless I make maps and spreadsheet, that sort of thing, and just kind of put everything out there for your digestion, how do you get the information in the first place? So I would say, if any of you all have any ideas about what would make the most sense for you visually for how you think about things, let me know.
Put some stuff together. I think that the issue with shared access is, when you're expressing opinions as members online.
You're not doing that. You're just, the shared documents are just there for you to have access to them. You're not modifying them on there in a way that you're all
once you have a
looking
format,
at.
like if you're doing here are all the things we think we should do, or research, or somebody needs to go out and check this out, or we hear requests about this or that. Is that maybe they'd be brought to the meeting, and then you guys would input them, and then we can go through it and say, we've had this thing on the list for however many years, 3 years.
Yeah.
Nobody's been out to that spot. It's down the street or whatever, and got the afternoon free. I should go do it and come back and say, this is what I found.
Right.
I found it not to be a value, or I found it to be messy. We have to clean it up. Or
right.
It's very swampy. We're not going to get a lot of trails in there, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, OneDrive is definitely a good way to get information out. And as long as you're not communicating with each other on there, there's no concern about violating open meeting law. And yeah, I mean, like, it would definitely, I like that idea of sort of a hybrid thing where that's all available there, but then during the meeting, we can actually work, and we can even pull it up here and work in it during the meeting in terms of actually modifying a spreadsheet or whatever. And that could work really well.
I know we've had times, we've been some meetings when the agendas are pretty light.
Most of the time.
Right.
Yeah. So,
And honestly, like I said, I don't have necessarily, it's been a while since I put a lot of attention into open space, because the open space plan was just such a
So much
drag on everybody that, I think even last week I just said, hey, email everybody and see if anybody has anything they want to talk about, because otherwise it's going to be pretty high level for a while, where we're just getting in the swing of actually discussing things other than the open space plan, and how our work process should go forward. But there is a lot to do. And this is the committee to sort of take action on a lot of that. So, yeah.
sounds good. I have nothing to probe for. Do you have anything to probe for?
I kind of said what I was thinking about was stuff that might lead to agenda items, or, like I said, if we have a meeting where we're like, well, we'd like to meet for an hour, but we have 20 minutes worth of discussion here. So, and if we have that OneDrive list or something like that, we can figure out who's going to go out and do what.
Especially now that the weather's nicer and everything's not iced over and gross.
Yeah. I mean, it would be easy enough to sort of, for now, tie into, I don't want to say like gaps in the stewardship program or whatever, but we know of like some areas that probably need to be looked at a base level, or need small things. So we could definitely put that list together. We could also put together sort of a just inventory. We already have like inventory, but to convert it to sort of a spreadsheet and inventory of conservation properties and even like different access points of conservation properties or trail by trail. Not all the trails have names. Again, that's part of that CPC thing, was there were several properties that were going to go through and color code the trails. That was done at Camp Nikon last year by one of our veteran tax work-off people, Katie Tucker. And I just need to tweak a couple of things. Like I need to get like I have a full card at forestry suppliers that I haven't ordered yet, and part of that is to get some paint, some of the tree marking paint, where I can just kind of touch up and like add to the ones we got were metal placards, and we only had enough to space them certain distances. And I just want to make sure that before we publish a map that has color coded trails, they're completely obvious in the field to everybody. Otherwise, that's for now. That you're going to get out there and you're not going to see anything.
Right.
But if you expect that you're going to see color markers everywhere, I want to make sure at least that they're consistent. And there's a couple other properties that I have to go through and get the placards up there too. So that could be something too, that if members want to go out and get some stuff done that's already on our punch list that needs to be done, that would be helpful too. But again, we'll work towards getting that kind of workable spreadsheet down, and then probably just some maps and some of the other stuff that I already have. Like we have that map and guide of open space properties that I did last year. We can make sure that's on the OneDrive. I hope to be done with the story map pretty soon too. I think that will be helpful in general, just for getting people out and seeing things. I think it'll have a lot of information in one spot.
Jada or Brian, do you guys have anything?
No, nothing from me. I just realized that I need to spend more time getting out to the property, because a lot of what you guys are talking about, I've only been to once or twice. So I need to.
You're supposed to check out that long distance Pine Barrens Trail draft for Camp Nikon and see if it's good for running.
Yeah, due to injuries, I haven't been running, so
no,
I can walk it, but
sorry to hear that.
Jada, you good?
Yeah, I'm good. As well as Brian, I should also get out and explore the trails more. But the weather's finally getting nicer, so opportunity.
It's the right time of year, other than the excessive rain that we have gotten and are about to get.
Wear your mud boots. You'll be all right.
I mean, I work outdoors now, so I have everything.
Yeah.
Nice.
Say since we're still on the open forum, do we want to consider another workday scheduling? I mean, I don't think we have to set it in stone, but we're talking about these tasks and we're here.
Yeah.
What was the properties that you said? You said you knew that you would need maybe eyes on it or something.
I did just bring up the whole color coding thing. Cranberry Watershed was one that we were going to try to get some of those trails color marked.
Yeah.
So,
and you mentioned Kentucky, someone was recently leaving a lot of beer cans.
Yeah, I interfaced with the police on that, and I haven't heard back. I haven't heard from the person who reported it, who says that he walks there from work every day on his lunch break. So he hasn't called back to say that it's continued, and I haven't heard anything from KPD, and I did put that on their radar too, and they said they were going to be checking on it. So my hope is that it stopped.
right.
But again, we do still need a lot of these places checked, and yeah. But yeah, this is good. This will be the impetus for all of you to get out lots and walk on all of our properties.
I did take my sister over to Blackwater the other day. She was like, "Oh my God, this place is huge." I'm like, "I've been telling you for years."
Nice.
Yeah. My 5-year-old niece didn't like it after about 4 minutes, but that's fine.
That's the way that goes.
Yeah. she didn't even like the crooked trees. I'm like, look at these cool trees. And she was like,
My kid does a great impression of me showing people trees and explaining why that tree is special.
those trees are great at Blackwater. They're all crooked at the end there. They're like so neat. And she was like,
So yeah, I mean, we could talk about a work day.
I mean, I like the idea of having a contingency too, so that if it's a Saturday and for some reason you can't show up, and we're gonna go to an otherwise, complex project where we need you to give us in and show us what to do. An easy one is Clifton Farm. There's probably enough work there for it to say, one person could do something, make an impact, but you're talking about some of it would be like 2 people to haul out some 2 contractor bags, there's some chunks of asphalt, there's 1 or 2 big chunks of concrete. Somebody had a good dolly, they can run down there with it, bring it back. So it's not a huge thing. I mean, I didn't go down to the areas where it gets down towards the water, so it just gets too. When I was there, it was too mucky to get beyond that first set of trees there.
Right.
But I had my eye out. It's certainly a bit of litter that's unsightly.
Yeah, so I mean, we could do, and I do, like I said, I still need to get some more materials before I could really do a work day for trail marking.
You thinking about the Henrik property in that?
No, I'm still sort of in a weird holding pattern on the Henrik property because I haven't been able to
it's really big out there too.
assess whether we actually need to swap lots or not, or whether we can put parking in the lot that we got at town meeting. So that just kind of killed all of my motivation for that for now. I really need to get out there and assess the soils, and just haven't had much time for any of that stuff in the office. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have a great, like, I think a lot of what needs to be done are things that people can do on their own. I don't have I can't think off the top of my head of like a really good group project at this point, other than if I can get all of the materials for getting the trail marking done. That's definitely something that we can meet up. Everybody can pick a trail or a section of a trail, and I can have all of the stuff that people need for putting up the markers, and that will be a really big help. We could probably think we might still need some GPS work in there too, so we can also have some people working with the GPS unit, confirming some of the trails too.
Why don't we see if we can do some exploring on our own? My voice can go up. In the next month, like all of us just take a property, see what it's like, and then you can work on your end, and then we can reconvene in April and maybe set dates. It's only a month away, it'll fly by.
Yeah, it's April 2nd, so
Right.
I think it's a good idea, and I think that might spur some
more ideas and more.
Like you might go to a property and like you might go to Patuxent and go like, we need a major cleanup.
When we went to Cranberry Watershed, I said we need those teenagers who need the community service credit for high school.
Oh yeah.
Because there's some cans in places where some guy in his mid-40s I don't want to climb down to, but when I was 16, I would have been up and down and up again in 2 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
With a bag full of beer cans.
Right.
They're just not as accessible anymore because of the what they do to the land.
Right.
Will you put a note for me to reach out to the school, because I haven't had, I want to say I haven't had a single student since I started here approach me for hours, and I haven't really interfaced. I mean, I interfaced with the horticulture
Well,
department.
they got rid of community service hours for a few years.
They did for COVID, but it's back,
yeah.
right?
I heard it's back, but
Okay.
then I heard it's only like half the time.
Yeah,
And that's why my first year here, there was no more requirement for it, so I didn't really tie in. And now if they're doing it again, I think we're pretty low hanging fruit for
that
slab
slab
foundation
foundation.
to do that work.
There's a lot of minor, they're broken up roofing bits and everything else. That'd be a good one for a group of people to work, particularly the teenagers, as a grid,
Right.
and then get a large magnet on a wire or something.
For nails.
Back and forth. You can get the the big ones like Harbor Freight, just a few bucks to pick up everything.
Right.
Now, do we have any? That's one of the ones you want to trail on, right? Do we have halfway decent maps of that entire property? Yeah. Because it's so big, I think you just need a map to get started.
I did, we had
And then verify.
pre-existing maps, and I took those and modified them to this like new color-coded scheme that isn't yet in the field. But like I said, I would need just some like confirmation. So like you have somebody and say like, you know, we would basically go out and mark, you know, everybody would have a copy of that map that you could put in your phone where you could pull it up and see where you are on the map.
Right.
And you go along and you put up the color-coded placards as you go along. And then I would just say, when we're done, somebody should be going like, hey, can you go GPS the red line? And you go GPS the red line. So that way I could take that back in and overlay that and make sure it's not wildly different than what we show on the map, just so we're as accurate as we can be with our mapping.
You mentioned naming. A lot of places don't have name trails. What kind of naming conventions?
I haven't named any trails. I've just been doing color coding.
Oh, so if we're walking the trails, if you see something that could lend itself to a name, like if you want to say the Big Rock Trail, or
yeah,
the Water's Edge Trail, or something like that,
Right.
you can start building that list, and then when somebody else walks in, they would say, "Yeah, I think it's more of a Water's Edge Trail, where the Big Rock was the dominant feature of what we saw when we walked it."
less
Illustrate
worried
a number
about
of them.
less worried about trail names, but I think they do help. Like I'm more worried about color marking and mapping, but especially for some place like Cranberry, that could work out well, because Cranberry is going to have, I don't know, it's tough. Some of these properties, there's so many trails that we don't want. You only want certain trails. You want to make sure that you're accessing interesting things or different parts of the property, giving opportunity for longer distance walks. But with, you know, between dirt bikes and people just kind of meandering, doing their own thing on a lot of our properties, there's just tons of unnecessary trails. So I feel like we're going to have property the size of Cranberry, probably some trails that don't end up color marked that maybe we don't want to get rid of, and naming would be a good thing for some of those. But that's all up to the committee. We can figure that all out over time, and that may be where some of the members getting out on the trails might say like, well, this trail would be cool if it, you know, this is a good part of that trail, we should name it after it or something.
Right.
It's like,
I was also thinking, if you had a good map, we can make a grid, because there's so much work in there potentially to do. That, you know, members can take their different quadrants or whatever.
yeah. You know, part of what I talked about earlier with the Carrera thing is this idea of a stewardship center. Again, this is something that a lot more information will come out on, but that's part of the idea is, you know, Kingston doesn't have a budget for land management. It's in any given year, it's about $5,000 for my department. You know, it's been as much as 10 and as low as 4 in my tenure here. And, you know, we pulled half of that 10 to do what we did when we bumped the admin assistant up to be assistant agent. But, you know, a lot of what we do in terms of maintenance of those properties is supposed to be, you know, volunteer stewardship. And it's something that I continually task whoever's Juliana's position, like, hey, you have to get this program and ramp it up again. But it's just not easily done. And while you can get some people to return emails and say they'll be part of something, it's another thing completely to have it actually function and like know where there's problems and get things dealt with. But the reality is we're going to need volunteer stewardship for all of our properties over the years, and it can't just be open space committee members or, you know, even Concom members. Like, it's going to have to be more than that. So I think that's part of the idea behind this stewardship center is there's already a house and outbuildings on the property that would lend themselves well to this type of a program, and that program could in turn maintain that property and other properties in town. So that program, while training volunteers and all of these things, could also just go out and do the work. And there's not a ton of work that needs to be done. I always push that point that we don't need everything we own to be totally maintained and groomed. It's more about functionality, and you shouldn't be going out there and seeing a ton of trash. You shouldn't have blockages over the trails that are desirable, like you go to Camp Nikon, you're gonna see a lot of trail blockage because we need about 10% of the trails that currently exist at Camp Nikon. We're trying to block off a lot of the ones that that don't make sense. But, you know, in general, they should just be passable and, you know, just doesn't need to be overdone. But it's been really hard to get volunteers to step forward to handle any of that. So this is something I think that really has potential to help over the long term in keeping financial liability of the town low for maintaining the properties while getting the benefits of having those properties, which is that provides resources for people in town to passive recreate, allows places for wildlife, allows places for trees to make oxygen for all of us to breathe, and manage stormwater so we get infiltration into the aquifer. So it's my hope anyways, is that all of this kind of goes smooth and will help with this stuff over the long
term. Next thing is meeting minutes. Keith was not a member for one of them. Jim, no, it doesn't matter because he's not here. Did everybody read the minutes? Okay. I just need a motion.
Move to accept the meeting minutes of our November 7th, 2023 meeting.
Second. All right, we'll do a roll call. Brian?
Yes.
Jada?
Yes.
Keith? Sorry.
Aye.
Megan is a yes. So we need September 5th, 2023 and December 5th, 2023.
Move to accept the meeting minutes of December 5th, 2023.
Brian?
Yes.
Jada?
Yes.
Keith?
Aye.
Megan is a yes. Then Jada or Brian, you have to make a motion for the other minutes.
I can make it.
term. And that's for September 5th.
Yes.
Is November 7th or?
Heath did November 7th. We already did December 5th. We just need September 5th.
Okay, I'll second Jada's motion.
Perfect, thank you. All right, Brian?
Yes.
Jada? Jada?
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. I am a yes. All right, Heath is abstaining. Okay. That is it?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Nothing before I close it? Anything? All right, the next meeting will be held Tuesday, April 2nd, 2024, starting at 5:45 p.m. The time is now 6:38. And will the member make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Move to adjourn at 6:38.
Yeah, second. All right, Brian?
Yes.
Jada?
Yes.
Keith?
Aye.
Megan is a yes. Meeting is over. Yes.